Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Chris Alaimo.
And I'm Ben Gassaway. Together, we are the Amateur Investors.
This podcast is our open source journal of everything we learn about investing and wealth management.
We're here to explore the key concepts, market dynamics, and investing strategies that will assist you on the path toward financial independence and financial literacy. Our mission is to build us up from amateurs to experts.
All suggestions are our own, and we recommend that you do your own research before taking any investment advice. See you in this week's episode. We hope you enjoy it. All right. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Amateur Investors podcast. This week we'll be talking to Kaz Bycko, the host of Down the Rabbit Hole. I just want to throw a little caveat to him. I have to say your opening music for your podcast is some of my favorite. Honestly, I get chills every time I hear it. So something that I really recommend you guys check out. Obviously, it's a Bitcoin-centric podcast, but a good one nonetheless. So first, I want to do a shout out to our sponsors at Coinbase.com. They have a wealth of information about all things Bitcoin on the website, from articles and links about where to buy Bitcoin, where are the best places for hot and cold wallets, for self-custody your Bitcoin, the potential risks of Bitcoin, and much more. It's been a pleasure partnering with them to bring an episode a month for the next few months. Our latest episode was with Adam O, aka Denver Bitcoin on Twitter. All about Bitcoin mining. It was a really good episode that Ben and I did, and we really hope you guys enjoy it. It was episode 42. So thanks for coming on the show, Cats. I'll push it your way.
What's up, Chris? How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm really excited to hear, I guess, what your origin story is for Bitcoin, and then ultimately what led you to going Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. Like I said, I've been really looking forward to this interview, and I'm excited for what you have to say today.
Yeah. So my Bitcoin journey started probably 7 or 8 years ago. At this point is when
Wow.
I stumbled across it. I did not understand what I was getting myself into. I was really aware of the money problem early on in my life. Like, I knew about it in high school. I was aware of inflation, and I knew about like the economics of it. And I was like, okay, this is not sustainable. And shortly after, I dove deeply down the technology rabbit hole, and I was really into data privacy and taking control of myself on the internet. And I stumbled across this thing called Bitcoin. This was like 2014, and I didn't understand it at all. I didn't understand it in the context of the money problem that I thought I understood at the time either. So kept going down it, stumbled across it a few more times over the next like 2 years. And then really 2016, it was like, okay, it was like a recurring thing in my life. I was like, this Bitcoin thing keeps coming up. Like, maybe I should pay attention to it and like look deeper into it. So 2016 is when I really started to fall down the rabbit hole. And, in 2017, we had the huge, blow off top and, fell down the shitcoin rabbit hole too. And then 2018 is where my Bitcoin maximalism journey started. A lot of the best books came out of that time. The best, some of the best content was started. Podcasts were all started at that time. And so as I was going through my journey of Bitcoin maximalism and reading Saifedean's book, The Bitcoin Standard, I was a NIM on Twitter, and I was like, man, this is really starting to become like who I am. And, years go by, 2019, and then 2020 happens. And I said, okay, I can't, keep this. Like, I felt like it was a split personality at one point, when you're a NIM on Twitter and you're so like deeply involved in Bitcoin, and you're like, man, I want to attach this to my identity, even though everyone's like, worry about your OPSEC and, you can't use your real identity. Whenever you're like truly passionate about it, it's hard not to. Like, I want it to be known. And if you want to work in the space, it's difficult to be a NIM unless you're a developer. So I was like, man, 2020 happened. I was like, I have a message for the world. And at the same time, I want to learn. And I was like, the best way for me to break into the space is to just start a podcast and, have some conversations with people. I was like, what are the odds I'm going to have a conversation with Pierre Richard? The only way I can do that is if I start a podcast. And so that really excelled my learning too, just the people I've been exposed to and the conversations I've had over the last year that I've been doing it.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, I'd have to say the community is some of the brightest and like some of the brightest and most diverse people. women, men, they always say Bitcoin's for enemies, and I think that's really true. I think it's really sad that we've politicized everything. I mean, not to get into the politics sides of it, but it always seems, oh, more liberal-leaning people are saying, oh, it's evading taxes, it's bad, it's all this, where the conservatives are kind of latching onto it, saying, your privacy is important. But I really think no matter the way you look at it, when the currency is collapsing, it doesn't care if you're libertarian, liberal, Republican, agnostic, you don't even pick a side. It's going to be what everyone needs. And we're seeing the cracks of the fiat society collapsing. I know it sounds very grandiose in the way I say it, but I guess my journey kind of started in 2017. A lot of my listeners know that. One of my friends from an acquaintance from high school was like, oh, we should all buy this. It was like probably when it was like around $1,000 or $2,000 before it ran up. And I literally, like most people, I'm like, this is tulip mania. This is fake. It rode up, it blew off top and collapsed. And I was like, okay, I was right. And then I kind of really put it on the back burner until 2020. It really opened my eyes up when I'm like, what the hell are we doing? We're dropping interest rates to near zero. All these companies can take on bad debt or good debt for that matter at really cheap rates. And then, we're just going to keep printing money and buying corporate and government bonds. I'm like, this is like society's collapsing, and you're seeing a lot of it. Like, companies are driven by profits, and they're willing to scrape and claw and do things that are maybe, I don't want to say amoral or immoral, but like, basically it's just everything looking for profits, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
Absolutely. Like it's the sort of the incentive model of the fiat system. It's broken, like you're alluding to, and they're just driven by profits because that's short time preference thinking that's stemming from the broken money problem.
Yeah, and even like I remember there was a tweet chain that was running around on Twitter, which it's funny when a lot of the Bitcoiners say the same thing in unison. But I know one of them that really struck me was like, principles matter. And in a short time preference, everyone's like, oh, they're trying to make the quick buck. They're trying to, I don't want to say screw over people, but that's basically the way that it feels. My dad has been with his company over 34 years, and they just announced, I mean, he was 23 when he started there, so he's literally been there his entire career. The company announced that if he doesn't retire by the end of the year, he's losing the health benefits that were promised to him. It wasn't like, maybe you get this. It was, if he were to retire early before 65, they would cover the gap between if he were to retire at 50, 58 to 65 till he hits Medicare. If he doesn't retire by the end of the year, they're forcing his hand. And it's just like things like that's just one company. But I know a lot of companies do that. They got rid of pensions. They got rid of other things. And we don't even have to go into how bad pensions are or any other things they're investing in. But things that they were promised to help their people. There were incentives to get them to stay. Even you see in our age, we're millennials. I mean, if you're not changing jobs every 2 years, you're losing money because of just the money printing that's going on and the inflation. And it's insane. Like, loyalty is dead and gone. And that sounds horrible because when you think about Bitcoiners and talking about, becoming sovereign and like building up a strong base, it's around you and building out to your family and then to your friends and like building a community. It is really community building.
Right. So there's a lot that you went into there.
Sorry, I just went on a rant there.
Yeah. So pensions and like at our age, they're telling us right now that Social Security, we're not even going to see it yet. It's being taken away from us.
Every paycheck. Yeah. Every paycheck comes out.
It's maddening. The next part you went into is you said that if you're not changing jobs every 2 years, you're losing money. I would agree with that if you're still on the fiat standard. Like, if you're on that fiat hamster wheel, which I was for a while, I was working in the consulting world and, for big companies. And I was like, man, I just got to keep pushing. And like, that's what's going to get me to the next level is like this next job, this upward change to this new job, whatever it was. And it's like, it is a hamster wheel. Like, they are enslaving you with that mentality. And it's like, oh, if I just work harder, if I just do this, then I'm going to be free. And then you just keep doing that, and people get trapped in the matrix of life, and they end up never doing anything. They end up being like, they work so hard to get fuck you money, and then they never say fuck you. They just keep working, and they stay on the hamster wheel. So like, what is the point of chasing after that if you can't actually be free and, go enjoy your life and do these things that, like, what are you working for, right? A big part of your life should be work. And I truly believe that that's what's causing a lot of problems in society is because people don't want to work. And now they have all the incentive not to work. So they don't really have a meaningful life because their life is not defined through their work and who they are. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. But the way to opt out outside of that, to exit that hamster wheel in my world is Bitcoin. Like you don't have to keep changing jobs. You don't have to keep pushing for that, minuscule raise that means nothing when they print, 30% of the dollars in history in 1 year. Like what is your 15% raise at that point? So the way to opt out of that system is to use Bitcoin, is to save your time and your money in Bitcoin. So that's how I exit the hamster wheel.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, as you can just see, if you just annualize the returns on Bitcoin alone, it's like I forget the numbers right now, but it was like 191%. Let's just say 200% returns. Even if you get half that, that's much better returns than any S&P 500 or Nasdaq. And I think going into Michael Saylor and what he refers to it, he's like, "What's your inflation number?" Obviously, inflation is very different from person to person and situation to situation. I'm currently living in my parents' basement, so my inflation, aside if it's not hitting beer and pizza and things like that, it's much different versus if you own other assets but a number that he kept saying that for the longest time I couldn't figure out. He's like, what if inflation's 39%? And I'm like, where does he keep getting, or 37%? I'm like, where does he keep getting this number? And then I was like, oh crap, he's talking about the S&P 500. Like it's gone up 37% because of the amount of money we're printing is, buying houses or homes is difficult and things are going very quickly. So if you just take your money and you just shove it in the S&P 500 or the index for the S&P 500, that's the inflation that you're seeing. If you're trying to buy a used car, is up 41%. If you're trying to buy a house, they were up 15%, but that's a big ticket item, so it's just going rampant. And the thing that Jerome Powell, obviously the chairman of the Fed, he said something that was so disingenuous. And it's weird when you're in those positions. Like, I do not envy Jerome Powell at all. Like, he's in the toughest spot ever because if he raises interest rates, then obviously all the money and like basically he's caught in the hamster wheel that if he raises money, the companies are going to hate him and potentially gets fired because it's like, oh, you're crashing the economy. It's your fault. They're going to replace him. He's just kind of like a pawn in the system. If he keeps interest rates low, he's destroying the lower and middle class. So basically he's kind of looking like, I'm sacrificing the lower and middle class in order to prop up, corporations and big business, because he's not stupid. He knows where where he gets fed. It's from corporations and big business. So he said something that was so disingenuous in, I think, his June meeting. He was like, oh, no one of lower economic status has come into my office to like bring up the point that like this isn't fair or this isn't good. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Do you they're trying to scrape by on minimum wage jobs, working 2 to 3 jobs? The last thing they're doing is driving down to DC, knocking on your office and being like, hey, can I have a meeting with Mr. Powell? Yeah, at 1:00, please.
Because it's that easy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We can just go knock on the Fed's door and get a meeting with Jerome Powell.
Exactly. It was just so infuriating and so disingenuous. I'm like, what crack are you smoking? Like, this is so disingenuous. And I don't know. I don't know if there's anything you want to spin off of that or just add to that, basically.
Yeah, I mean, this is talked about a lot, but they're just caught between a rock and a hard place. Like they do one thing, they destroy the savings, like you talked about. They do another, they collapse the credit system. So there's not a lot they can do besides continue to print away money and devalue your money. So this is like the consequence of being at the end of the long-term debt cycle. And, I've been talking about this a lot. This is all part of like the monetary reset. So how do you, sort of protect your wealth, your savings, your time, your energy, everything? Yeah, you could put it, like you said, in the S&P that's gone up 37% in 1 year or whatever. It's ultimately just being devalued, but what can you pay for with your Tesla stock or your S&P 500 stock? Can you take that with you? It's not a bearer asset. So that's what's unique about Bitcoin is like, I can take this digital bearer asset, I can custody it myself. It's not in some Fidelity account or TD Ameritrade, and I can actually use it. And if you use it correctly, you can take it with you and you can store your entire wealth in 12 words in your brain.
Yeah. And kind of going into that as well, like exactly what you're saying. I mean, it in the way and how crazy the last 18 months have been, like it almost seems, and people joke and, people are saying conspiracy theorists about social credit score and stuff, like that's what they want to do in China. And that is coming to other parts of the world. Look at Australia, look at Canada right now. I don't want to say the US is too far behind. I hope we are, or at least fight this, but you kind of see like, I think, oh my gosh, Russell Okun, when he went to Nigeria, he took, I don't know if you've ever heard this story, back in like 2018, 2017, what made him become a Bitcoiner. So back in 2017 or 2018, he, was making his NFL money, and he was making, millions of dollars as an offensive lineman playing in the NFL. Quite a good player, to say the least, winning the Super Bowl with the Broncos at one point. But he went over to visit his family in Nigeria. I think he's either first generation American or second generation American. So he went over there, brought cash, US dollars that's valued highly in Nigeria. Their currency is not the best. So he brings it, he's giving it out to his family, nothing, extraneous, but he ends up running out of cash. So he goes to a Nigerian bank or Western Union or whatever it is, and he goes to withdraw money that he has in his account. Like he has, hundreds of $1,000s in his account, and he's like goes to withdraw it. And he had called his bank and credit card companies to let him know he was traveling abroad. And they said, yeah, no problem. So he calls, he's like, hey, I want to withdraw money. And they were like, hey, they're like, we see your account here, Mr. Okun. We can't let you do that. And he's like, what do you mean you can't let me do that? He's like, we don't deal with like Nigeria. Like we don't deal with the country of Nigeria. They're on our like financial list to not deal with. And he's like, it's my money. He's like, can I speak to your manager? And the manager basically gives him the same spiel and then ends up hanging up on him. And he's like, are you kidding me? And then that's really what pushed him becoming a Bitcoiner. He's like, whether it's a social credit system, whether it's the country you're from, whether it's your race, your religion, they can really discriminate you for whatever reason. We don't have to pick a reason. The bank, it's their money, and they're letting you take out of it, even though he earned it. And then that's ultimately what Russell became a Bitcoiner at that day. And that's, it took a couple months later to really do his research, but that's really what pushed him to becoming a Bitcoiner. I think it's the most powerful thing. And even I fear for like my dad or anyone in his generation that's like loving on their 401k, which has gone up a lot in the last year, 37% alone. And it's like, it's not your money. Like Fidelity, BlackRock, Vanguard, they can deny you for whatever reason, your vaccination status, because you're black, because you're white, because you like God, because you're a Muslim. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And that's what I'm trying to get at, because people don't realize that. They can discriminate for whatever reason. And people would say, oh, that's wrong. They can't do that. You earn that money. That's true. But at the end of the day, when you need that money to buy food, water, pay your bills, and they say you can't do anything, what's the next step? Like that's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely. Like, not to go too deep into like what you alluded to was the conspiracy theorists, which I think is hilarious now because it's all true. It's like there's no such thing as a conspiracy theorist. It's either you're like, you either know what's happening in the world or you're a complacency theorist. Like you just go along with whatever narrative they give you, right? And that's where I think most people are. And then there's people that are awake. And so, yeah, I mean, I stopped looking at it from an investment point a while ago. Like that's a great pitch and it's very compelling for a lot of people that are new to Bitcoin. And of course, yeah, it's a great side effect to get wildly rich, like while they're printing all this money. Yeah. But the best part of Bitcoin is what you said. It's like the way to insulate yourself against tyranny in the eyes of social credit that is coming. Like it's not just China. It is now gone to Australia and it's being teased in Europe and Canada. If it's not on your radar that it could possibly come to America, you're not paying attention. Honolulu is already saying, or Hawaii is already saying, you cannot even enter Hawaii basically without their Vax Pass. That's, that's three or four cities and now a whole state in the United States that are like discriminating you against this one particular, medical reason. Same thing's coming with bank accounts. Like if you are denying the vax, they're going to close your bank accounts. What are you going to do? Like you said, how are you going to buy food? Start putting your wealth in something that you can actually control, that you can take custody of and no one can take away from you. And that's Bitcoin.
Yeah. I guess changing topics there. I'm sorry, I was getting really passionate about it, but it's just you kind of see what's coming. And they always say conspiracy theory is only just 6 months early, and then it becomes truth, 6 months later. So I guess in your most recent episode, in episode 24 with Mind Matter, you said a quote that you repeat to yourself every morning, and I thought it was very good. It was learn to build the skill of discipline, and I love that. I think it's like truly resonates with me and many other people in the Bitcoin ethos that, whether you're buying every day, every week, every month, I was actually buying bi-weekly because that was how my pay period was. But I said, I changed my mind. I'm like, I'm going to buy every single day, $10, $15, whatever it is, if I have free money. But that's kind of what that's what I do. And it just kind of is a daily reminder. Like I'm doing it continuously. Oh, is $10 of Bitcoin going to change my life? No, but doing that over 365 days, over doing that over 5 years, over 10 years, that can change your life. So just consistency, working out. I was a swimmer for 11 years of my life. Were those practices grueling and painful and difficult? Absolutely. Did I get stronger and faster and it take time? Absolutely as well. So.
Yeah. So I say that like learn to build the skill of discipline. It's about that consistency, and it does tie very well to the Bitcoin ethos. It's proof of work. It's low time preference thinking. So no matter if it's taking the time to save your money and not put it somewhere else, that takes discipline. Buying Bitcoin every single day, whether it's $10, it's whatever you are allotting to, whatever you can afford. That's where you're putting your time and your energy and your resources. That's not going somewhere else. So if you were to take that $10 or that $15, go spend it, at your favorite restaurant or whatever, you're perpetuating the system that we keep complaining about. That is the fiat system. That is the sludge that is destroying people's lives. So if you're practicing what you're preaching, you're putting your money in Bitcoin because you do not want it to go anywhere else to perpetuate the system that is breaking society in all these different ways. So by just taking the little bit of time to punch the clock day after day, the proof of work of, wake up, stack sats, and it goes along with your health as well. Like you said, working out, meditating. It's so interesting. Like when Bitcoin, we say the meme, Bitcoin changes you, and then it actually does change you. And it shifts from just being part of your financial life to like, okay, how can I prepare in other areas of my life? And bringing it back to what we were talking about before, when we're looking at all these different social problems or societal problems, and how do we have a defense strategy against those things, it goes to your health as well, your mental health. When we're looking at, COVID lockdowns, people are going crazy in their house. You have to be mentally tough. You have to be physically prepared for society is trying to break you. And that is completely intentional. So this is learn to build the skill of discipline is not just, buying Bitcoin. That's part of it, but it's like hardening yourself and your principles in this time that people really need to start, digging deep.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I mean, what's the saying? Strong men build good times build weak men create hard times, and then the cycle just keeps repeating. Hard times make strong men. So I think that's a great analogy. And I guess back to your podcast as well. You said I remember it was either between you and Mind Matter. You said Bitcoin is the ultimate investment, and you said, or he was saying Bitcoin's the ultimate investment, and you kind of countered him, and you're saying actually your body and your mind is the ultimate investment. Bitcoin's like a way of life, and it's an important investment. I think you even said it was the second best, but really kind of going along with that, you basically said your mind and your body are best. And to quote Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, the irony that they're the kind of the ones that don't understand it. They've kind of had the benefit of the fiat culture and the fiat world. I obviously still respect them. I don't respect their opinions on Bitcoin. Obviously, I'm counter to them, but I guess you kind of say you kill your idols, and that's kind of what I felt in the last year and a half with Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. But he said by far the best investment you can make is in yourself. So it's ironic that they have all these great quotes, but at the end they kind of don't see it. I understand they're older and they don't have the best track record with technology investing, but it's just the irony that they don't see the benefit that this can do. They would rather shill buy Western Union stock. That's better. It's or you can do something that's better than Western Union, doesn't marginalize the lower and middle class. So it's just the irony of it all.
Yeah. And then when you start to analyze it, it's do they really not understand it, or do they just benefit from the Cantillon effect of being close to the money spigot? I mean, they benefit from printing money. They're so close to it and everything they own. Why would they be for Bitcoin? That disrupts their power structure. It disrupts their generational wealth and their monopoly on money printing that they benefit from. But yeah, I did counter Mind Matter in that episode. He said Bitcoin is the best investment. I think Bitcoin is ultimately a tool. Yes, it can be an investment, but ultimately it's a tool. You yourself, your mind, your body is the investment. And you cannot truly grasp Bitcoin until you get that. Like you can stumble across Bitcoin, you can buy Bitcoin, but until you really humble yourself, realize that you don't know what you think you knew. You have to go back. You have to, take the time, do the proof of work to study the things that actually make you understand Bitcoin. That takes you like digging deep within yourself. That's why these people can't do that, because they believe that they have like their entire worldview is constructed on this way of thinking. And that would take them saying, okay, no, wait, everything I know is wrong. And I have to go back and reassess. That's how you become a Bitcoiner. You have to be humble enough to do that and break your own worldview, which is not easy for a lot of people. Going back to what you said earlier in the conversation, it's sort of becoming politicized, and it looks like the liberals are taking the side against Bitcoin from the energy and all the other arguments that they have. Like, that is difficult because they have to reconstruct their worldview. And that's not something that a lot of people are comfortable with, and that's just how it is. So to truly grasp Bitcoin as an investment, as a tool, as the way we sort of defend ourselves against tyranny, you have to be humble enough to say, okay, maybe I don't know what I think I know. Maybe I need to go back and do more work. And then you really start to realize how much work it takes, right? I mean, learning about Bitcoin, I spent more time learning about Bitcoin than college. Like, I have 2 degrees too, and it's still like I value everything more. And like I don't even care about that shit. It's all about like the time and money, or not the sorry, the time I've spent investing in myself to learn about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think there's a couple things I want to hit there. So I think had you told me like 18 months ago or even 2 years ago that like the conservatives would be taking Bitcoin versus the liberals, obviously when you look at it just in the political sphere, you think like the liberals or more liberal leaning people are trying to help the lower and middle class. So I thought it would be a no brainer when they're like, oh, you're kind of screwing over big governments or big corporations. It would have went that way, and then the Republicans or conservatives would say, oh no, just keep investing in the S&P and keep doing all that. I never knew of the privacy aspect and the control aspect, and that's I really think they're kind of two sides of the same coin. I think don't ask me, or don't look at what they say, look at what they do, and I think both are at fault for a lot of things, and the way the system's just perpetuated into what we have right now. I'll kind of leave it at that. I think another key thing that you mentioned is Bitcoin's a tool, and people don't realize, people always want to I guess weaponize any tool, but that can be true for anything. People always say like, oh, like money's bad, money's evil. Like, well, if you're donating money to a charity and helping people like try and solve like breast cancer, or trying to help the people that are less fortunate, is money bad all of a sudden, or is it good? And then even like people are with guns. I know I won't even get into that topic but if you're a hunter and you kill an animal and then you do that to provide for your family, is that a bad thing or a good thing? Yeah, obviously if you're using it to do like a school shooting or something, obviously that's a bad thing. But it's the tool. The tool is in the eyes of the beholder is what you do with it. So yeah, of course, can you use Bitcoin to do bad things? Absolutely. Can you use anything to do bad things? Could you use a hammer to do bad things? Could you use a baseball bat? Could you use like it's endless. A car,
A coffee cup.
a coffee cup.
I
Exactly.
mean, you could kill somebody with a coffee cup. Should we ban
Yeah,
coffee cups?
a car. I could hit you with a car. I'm sure you would not be doing too hot if I did that. So it's really the tools in the eyes of the beholder. So I think that's a really important point as well. And yeah, kind of going on to your last point, like the cantillionaires effect. Obviously, uh, it's funny that Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and a lot of the people in that space, they don't see it like, obviously they want the old system. It's benefited them the most. But it's kind of funny that we've seen a lot of the hedge fund managers like Stanley Druckenmiller, Paul Tudor Jones, the list goes on, that they're always thinking about it in terms of risk. And they're hedging. Obviously, they're still in either bonds, probably not. The majority of them are smart enough to not go into that, but into equities basically. And now they're buying Bitcoin, and you're seeing their percentages grow because they're hedging against a collapse of a currency. On top of it, shows good returns without even the full collapse going on right now. So it's just very interesting that the more traditional people or the value investors are getting destroyed in the last 10 years, where a lot of the hedge funds are willing to change their perspectives and thoughts and kind of hedge their bets basically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that. I think you hit the nail on the dot with all of those points. I guess just to add on at the very end, like, yeah, that just it is. I guess no, this was your first point. It is interesting to see the conservatives take the point. Like you would think the more progressive people would be on the side of like adopting the newer technology rather than like sort of the conservative worldview is like they're more resistant to change. And I think that totally goes with like the administration we have and like the social forces that are happening all over the world that are changing policy and politics. Like, Bitcoin is now freedom money, and it's awakening people to that fact. And the sad part about the liberals that are saying that are kind of demonizing it is like they're ignoring or they're letting their financial privilege of being in the United States sort of like make them a little bit ignorant because it looks like the entire world is kind of waking up to this. They're like, oh, we need Bitcoin. Like El Salvador news happens on Monday,
Yeah.
like the first country to make Bitcoin legal tender. Now they're talking about, seven other ones or whatever. Who knows what's going to happen with all of that? But these are smaller countries that have not benefited, who have been solely at the blunt side of everything that the U.S. government does with dollar hegemony. Like they print money, and then whenever you're holding a foreign currency, they get like double whammy slaps. So it's like their home currency depreciates against the dollar, and the dollar is depreciating so much. So it's like the obvious choice is to hold Bitcoin in that situation. And so yeah, it's sad to me that some of my friends like so I'm actually recording with Croesus. I don't know if you know who Croesus
Yeah.
Bitcoin or
Yeah.
BTC is. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
He wrote like why the yuppie elite like hate Bitcoin, right? And this is like so many of my friends, like some of the most highly intelligent people, like way smarter than I am, went to some of the best business schools in the world or like, Harvard Law or whatever. And like they will not even open their minds to Bitcoin because of how they've shaped their worldview. It's sad.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that you can learn about growth is like, willing to change your mindset and willing to grow and adapt. And, I was against Bitcoin in 2017. I thought it was tulip mania. And obviously the circumstances changed, or at least my worldview changed of what was going on. So, I think that's a sign of growth and understanding. But yeah, I mean, just changing your worldview and kind of seeing the
Yeah.
benefits of it. Oh, going along with what your point is, like I'm an engineer by trade, chemical engineer, and a lot of my friends are engineers as well, and they're not seeing the collapse of like governments buying bonds and all that. And that was the other point I wanted to make too, is in the South America and Central America countries, the reason that it's happening, and it's, I'm going to try and simplify this as much as possible. If you have the El Salvador peso or whatever their currency was, obviously they've been dollarized since I think 2004 or 2001. What was happening was we were printing money, obviously not in times of crisis, but the government was still buying government bonds and government debt continuously. So while that's happening, El Salvador is trying to buy U.S. goods or trying to transact with us, or basically they need our currency, because what they were doing is, as we're printing in the United States, El Salvador is also printing. But the US dollar is seen as stronger because more countries, they have the network effect of fiat, in the sense that you need to use it to buy energy, petrodollar. So gasoline, basically, or oil. So then the El Salvadoran government continues to print money. So as they're printing money, they're hyperinflating their currency. The US isn't hyperinflating as much because there's global usage, where El Salvador, they only use in the country. So that's why when you hear about Argentina and Colombia and all these, Venezuela, all these countries having their currencies collapse, because they're printing it. But the US knows they're printing it. So then the exchange rate of like the cost of El Salvador money goes up to order to buy one single dollar. So basically you're seeing the exchange rate keep inflating and keep inflating. And while that's occurring, all the people are watching energy spike, food spike. And the saying in Russia when they had their currency collapse, or Germany, when the wheelbarrow story, where there was a bucket of cash, or bolivars, I believe, and
Hmm.
basically this woman went to go grab bread and eggs because her husband came back with his money, and she went into the store and she came out and the cash was strewed all across the street, and they stole the wheelbarrow because the wheelbarrow was more valuable than the
Yeah.
cash that was like in it. And I know I really dumbed that down. Obviously, that can occur over time, over years. But obviously, all these smaller countries are having their currencies collapse. And then when they collapse, the U.S. kind of offers them a lifeline by saying, "Hey, just dollarize, just go onto the U.S. dollar, so that way you have a fixed monetary supply." And they're like, "Oh, okay." So they do that, and it's good for a time. Except that when the crisis happened in March of 2020, El Salvador didn't get to print. They didn't get $1,200 stimulus checks. They didn't get $600 stimulus checks. They didn't get $1,400 stimulus checks. They didn't get like credits for having kids and stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand with trying to help people, but at the same time, when you're helping people at the expense of hurting other people, the mainstream media and the world, obviously you get different news depending on where you are in the world, but obviously they always prop it up that like you're the good guy or you're in the good light. We're even in the United States, not only are we marginalizing our own middle class and lower class, we're marginalizing the world's lower and middle class. And we've become a global economy, but at the same time we can push poverty and slavery and other horrific things into other parts of the world at the benefit of this globalization. And I know that's not what people want to hear. With us supporting China as much as they are our main trade adversary, they're doing horrible things. The millions of people they're enslaving. The reason that China is able to be a world superpower is they basically enslave their own people. Not saying the U.S. is doing any better. We're basically doing the same thing, but they're able to create goods by paying their employees below poverty wages. Yes, they've propped up their middle class more because of what they've done, but yeah, it's just insane. And I'm sorry for going on a rant there. If there's anything you want to add, just good
No.
conversation.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head again. Like it's really sad, and like, a lot of these countries are paying utilities and energy costs in US dollars too. So
Yeah.
whether they're on a dollar standard or whether they have their own domestic currency, whenever the price of energy is like exponentially going up, like one of my friends, Bobo Dread, I don't know if you know him or not.
No, I
uh,
don't. Unfamiliar. I'll check them out though.
he's from Jamaica, and he was telling me that all of their energy costs are paid in US dollars because of these multinational corporations or countries that come in, they siphon the resources out of these places. It's really sad. And then not even to get like touch on the slavery issue, like we're using, child slave labor in South Africa, China, all over the world now for like,
Cheap goods.
lithium batteries for solar energy. So when people are like the moral argument for, green energy, they're not taking into account like how they're getting that. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, and being an engineer, I mean, I definitely say one of the benefits of having my degree is we're looking to use math and science to solve complex problems. And this is not to brag, it's just the way that we're taught. But when you look at something, when you look at a life cycle, you have to put a box around it. So if you're looking at whatever system it is, and when you look at the ins and outs, you have to go all the way back down the supply chain. And obviously, of course, people are like, "Oh, green energy. It's I love solar panels or I love wind turbines." And it's like, that's great. Like you think, we built something, we took some pieces, put them together and made a wind turbine. How did they get the plastics? Oh, they used petroleum. How did they get that? Like, oh, they had to use a bunch of different diesel engines to mine silicon. They had to use all these different products to drill to get lithium. Like, and they don't look at all the
And they
factors.
put each individual wing of a turbine on a giant like cargo, and they ship it across the country. Like how much gasoline does it take to ship these all over the place?
Yeah,
Then you have to
exactly.
then you have to clean the solar panels with this tractor that's using gasoline. It's like the argument makes no sense when you don't examine the nuance.
It really is. And I know with being an engineer, like nuclear is probably the best energy ever. And I know with Chernobyl and the Cold War, and there's a lot of different nuances that make nuclear look bad. But when you look at it from an engineering standpoint, there's a fantastic statistic. It was well, this is horrible, but it was a statistic talking about deaths per 100,000 per capita. Basically, they're normalizing for every energy industry, and they actually said nuclear is like the way lowest, because obviously when you're doing something that's very harmful, you need to be more safe, more conscientious, and per 100,000, it's actually the far lowest deaths per 100,000 per capita of that. And obviously they even done studies, so people are like, oh well, they're not dying immediately, but what about radiation poisoning, what about cancer? And they actually did a long-term study of that as well, and they're like, oh, so do you think breathing the fumes of gasoline or any other energy is better, or how you made that. And it's pretty astonishing. Like those can cause cancer as well, just as much as nuclear. So or actually the nuclear is lower, like I said. So I think it's fascinating. You have to look at things, the big picture, not just the one isolated storyline or narrative or marketing pitch that it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so we'll get into the wrap up now. Kaz, once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've had a really good conversation today, and it's great to finally meet you. I know I see a lot of what you post on Twitter and stuff. So I guess,
Chris.
So I guess going into the first question, I guess, what are your goals and aspirations for Down the Rabbit Hole? I know I really enjoy your episodes, but what's your future hold, or where do you see that going, basically?
Yeah, so I just want to continue to put out content that has a message behind it, and I want to continue to enjoy it. And I hope people find value in it. And that's really what I started doing. I said in the very beginning, I wasn't going to like drown people out with ads. I wasn't going to sell out for some advertiser that I didn't really believe in the message. And then like last week, I added my first sponsor. So now it's becoming a little bit more than just a hobby, which it was in the beginning. So now I have more of a financial incentive. I'm under a contract to like put out more content, but it's not about that. It's totally about like, I want people to see where the problems are at in the world. And not that I think that I have all the answers to them. It's more like I just have access to this network, and there's a ton of smart people that I have conversations with that the average person needs to hear these people. Like Bitcoiners have a great bullshit detector, and they search for truth in the world. And if you're not searching for truth, nothing really makes sense right now. Like you're looking at all of these problems, like whether it's COVID, whether it's money, whether it's like your business, everyone's like, what is going on? Everyone thinks it's the end of the world. Like, why does everybody think that? And if you look at it through the context of like, no, this is very architected. This is a monetary reset. We're at the end of a lot of cycles that are converging at the exact same time, not just financial. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I just want people to hear the message, and I want people to find value in it. And if you don't find value in it, then don't listen to it. But the signal just won't be stopped, and I enjoy it. Like, it's really just fun to have conversations with people like this, like I've really enjoyed this conversation on a technically a holiday. We're sitting here drinking some coffee, having a morning chat, like talking about world problems. So I'm all about that.
Yeah, and I think it's been a great conversation. Thanks for coming on, Kaz. And going even to add to your point too, of just like looking at the problems of the world and like kind of really truth seeking. It's interesting because obviously we're an investing podcast, and I just look at all asset classes. But it's like, how can you tell me that this week alone, I think the S&P 500 hit an all-time high 3 different times, and it's like, but are we better off 18 months now versus 18 months ago? I'd say absolutely not. So it's by design, exactly what you just said, like that this system's collapsing. We just passed the 50-year anniversary of the true fiat currencies.
Yeah.
And,
right.
If you look even in history, I mean, Bitcoin's amazing that you're looking at engineering, you're looking at privacy, you're looking at history, you're looking at monetary theory, you're looking at thermodynamics. It kind of hits all gambits of life. And when you look at it from that time perspective, anyone would say 50 years is a long time. But when you look at it, the grand scheme of the world, like empires are 250 years or on generally before they collapse. That's kind of what the tail end of the United States is. So we're having a monetary collapse and an empire collapse at the same time. And I don't think that that's, by coincidence. Like that's by design. Like, it goes through cycles, and we're coming toward the end of our cycle. So it's pretty crazy. I guess on that note, going to the last few wrap-up questions. So before you go, I guess, what's your biggest investment or business mistake? This could be about, I guess, maybe not saying I didn't buy Bitcoin earlier. I think we all agree on that. But what would be your biggest investing mistake? And that can even be about something investing in yourself or whatever that may be.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it would have to be investing in myself. I've always been very into fitness and health, but there's like a new level of finding that, and not, and it goes back to the consistency and the discipline that we talked about in the beginning. I would say like when I first found Bitcoin, I was not even near who the person I am as investing in myself as I am now. Now it's like before I start my day of work, I spend almost 3 hours of self improvement, whether that's a combination of working out and cold showers and meditation, and whether it's physical or mental across these different spectrums, even just getting myself in check so I'm better with my relationships, I'm a nicer person. Like I wake up pissed off, and if you don't wake up pissed off in 2021, you don't know what's happening right now. It's infuriating to me, but I have to find a way to dial that in. And so I'd say my biggest mistake, it's not even a mistake because I don't really look at things whether like, yes, I've made mistakes, without a doubt. Everybody makes mistakes, but I don't look at things in terms of mistakes anymore. And it's like everything has a lesson attached to it. And it's, are you humble enough and are you confident enough in yourself to say, okay, what is the lesson here? How am I wrong? How can I look at this differently? Maybe I'm looking at this completely wrong, kind of rambling at this point, but there's a lot to take into it. And I don't really look at things whether in terms of mistakes or not.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, what's your favorite book, podcast, YouTube channel, or website that you like to go for Bitcoin information or investing information in general?
Yeah, my favorite podcast is Tales from the Crypt with Marty and Matt.
That's a great one. I listen to that all the time as well.
Yeah, so my best investing advice is stay humble and stack sats.
All right.
I know this is a big investing podcast, and I was looking at your portfolios and everything. I was like, man, I can't relate. I don't own any stocks.
Yeah, I've changed my. I've been going out of equities and a lot more into Bitcoin. So yeah, I'm trying to. I have some basically in retirement accounts that I'm trying to figure out. I know Unchained Capital just hired. What's his? I'm drawing a blank on his name. They just hired the guy that basically just
Jeff Vandrew.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. That like basically you can convert to an IRA and then kind of convert that into Bitcoin, which I'm definitely looking into. It's just taking some time. Obviously, you got to take some time to learn about it. So, Kaz, thank you once again. It's been a pleasure having you on. If someone wants to go check out or learn more about your podcast or learn more about you, where would you send them?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. It's pretty much where I run everything out of. It's BTC Kaz, Kaz, on Twitter. Podcast is in my bio, Down the Rabbit Hole with Kaz Bycko. Also, I work for Swan Bitcoin. So if you guys are interested in picking up some Bitcoin, swanbitcoin.com/Kaz.
All right. Thanks, Kaz.
Thanks, Chris.
As always, everyone, you know where to find me, on the podcast, on Spotify, obviously on our website, we're on Twitter, Facebook, you name it, all those places. So have a good one, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.